And the one on the very top of the list that drives me absolutely mad is phenylephrine. Now, the brand name for this is usually Sudafed PE or decongestant PE, and that PE stands for phenylephrine. Typically comes in about 5 milligram tablets, and you'll get all kinds of different instructions on the back of the box that says, take 1 or 2 every 6 hours, whatever it is. You don't need to take any of it because it's absolutely worthless. It shouldn't even be on the shelves.
Welcome to No Filter Doctor, where we cut through the health hype, dig into what's real, what works, and what's backed by evidence. I'm your host, Dr. AK. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I am really tapping into the No Filter Doctor energy, and I am not holding back on this topic. Today's topic is over-the-counter medications, and you may wonder, why are you so hype about over-the-counter medications? Let me share this with you, my friends. It is a multi-million-dollar industry. Cough medicines alone generate $10 to $12 million. And guess what? A lot of these medications don't even work. I have these conversations with my patients, whether it's in the emergency department, in the office. I also have them with friends and family. They'll call me, they'll talk to me about some medication that they got, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. Let me tell you the facts about that. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the facts about that so that you have a little bit more information when you're going into it. And unfortunately, not everybody who's out there who are making recommendations of different medications, including over-the-counter ones, know all of this information. So it's a great way to start a conversation with your physicians and the people who are in your healthcare team to say, hey, I heard that this doesn't work. What are your thoughts on that? And then you can get a better recommendation. The first category of medications that we're going to talk about are cough and cold medications. And the one on the very top of the list that drives me absolutely mad is phenylephrine. Now, the brand name for this is usually Sudafed PE or decongestant PE, and that PE stands for phenylephrine. Typically comes in about 5 milligram tablets, and you'll get all kinds of different instructions on the back of the box that says, take 1 or 2 every 6 hours, whatever it is. You don't need to take any of it because it's absolutely worthless. It shouldn't even be on the shelves. There was a 2007 meta-analysis that demonstrate 10 milligrams of phenylephrine does absolutely nothing when it comes to nasal congestion. It is 2026, and this stuff is still on the shelves. So let me talk to you about the mechanism and the theory here. When you have nasal congestion, it's usually from inflammation that gets started from a virus or some kind of irritant like an allergen or something like that. Well, what happens, the blood vessels dilate, and that's when you get a lot of that congestion. So when you are taking these decongestants, as phenylephrine claims, they will cause the blood vessels to constrict and take down that inflammation and decrease that congestion. Another study came out in 2009 where they compared phenylephrine, pseudoephedrine, and placebo. Now, pseudoephedrine is a totally different medication. This is the medicine that you have to show the pharmacist your driver's license and promise you're not going to make methamphetamine from it. That's a totally different substance. So when they looked at phenylephrine, pseudoephedrine, and placebo, they found that pseudoephedrine actually works. And that's what we use in my household whenever we have to use a nasal decongestant. Nobody in my household has any contraindications to it, so you need to have a discussion with your physician and make sure that you're even a candidate for it. Like if you have really high uncontrolled blood pressure, you will not be partaking in the pseudoephedrine decongestant. And there's other things that you have to go through as well. So talk to your doctor about that, but no matter what, no phenylephrine. There was actually a petition, a citizen's petition that was filed in 2015 requesting that phenylephrine be taken off the market, and the FDA declined to do so. That's how much data is out there that phenylephrine is absolutely worthless. Do not waste your money. The other one that is on my chopping block is guafenicin, and that is available in Mucinex, Robitussin, a couple other generic cough medication preparations. The theory is that guafenicin thins the mucus. It makes it more watery, so when you're coughing, you're able to get rid of more and get it out of your body. The problem is there is zero evidence to support that that actually happens. There was a 2014 randomized controlled trial that looked at the effectiveness of guafenicin in these claimed properties and found that it does absolutely nothing. There was another study done in 2015 that supported these same exact findings. Believe it or not, an alternative to guafenicin may be honey. Now, this study was done in pediatric populations because a lot of the pediatric patients shouldn't be taking any of these meds. So there are a bunch of studies that were done, and one of them looked at using honey to suppress cough, and they found that honey may be an effective cough medication in pediatric patients who are older than 1 year of age. And the reason for that is honey's not pasteurized or anything like that, and it can have botulinum spores inside the honey. Now, if you are older than 1 and you eat these spores, it's not really going to do anything. If you have an intact immune system, it's not going to do anything. But if you are less than 1 year of age, you can actually get infantile botulism. So that's why honey is not recommended in kids less than 1 year of age. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any adult studies on honey. I only have anecdotal evidence, which we know is not worth a whole lot, that honey may be useful in an adult with cough suppression. But I would take that way, way, way before I would do guafenicin or phenylephrine. The last medication I want to discuss is oxymetazoline. Now, it is also known as Afrin, and it actually is quite effective. But there is a huge warning that you need to know about this medication. Remember, we talked about that narrowing of the blood vessels in the nasal passages whenever you're congested. Afrin totally narrows them. The problem is, if you use it chronically, two things can happen. In exceedingly rare circumstances, it can cause local tissue trauma. So you're using the Afrin, you're not allowing the blood flow to get to the tissues that it needs to get to, and you can have some tissue necrosis. That is very rare, but you do need to know about it. It does exist. The other thing, which is more realistic, is you then become dependent on Afrin. Your body kind of forgets how to take care of nasal congestion on its own. And then you get this rebound congestion that will not go away. It's a bajillion times worse. So in general, if you're going to use the Afrin, it is an OTC medication that works, but you're not supposed to use it for more than 3 days. Otherwise, you can develop that rebound response to the use of it. Now, there's a lot of stuff out there about different GI medications. I've been hearing some things about proton pump inhibitors and a few other medications. I honestly couldn't find a lot of data on those specifically, but I could find data on one medication, which is Colace, also known as Docusate. That has always been recommended as a stool softener, but guess what? It doesn't work. There was a systematic review that was done in 2000 that demonstrated this. They looked at Colace's properties and its ability to soften stool, and they found that it does nothing better than placebo. There was a Cochrane review that came out in 2015 that also confirmed those findings. Another systematic review came out and was like, hey, if you need to poop, try some polyethylene glycol, try some senna, milk of magnesia also works. So there are other medications out there. They're more of the stimulants. Some people don't really like to take those stimulants. It can cause abdominal pain. It can cause cramping. It might overcorrect the situation and cause profuse diarrhea. So I can understand the hesitation, but Colace does absolutely nothing. Just want you to know that so you can save those pennies. When it comes to eye medications, Visine is on the hit list. Now, I don't know if any of you follow Dr. Glaucom Flecken, but he's an ophthalmologist. He has a huge social media profile. A lot of the stuff he does is satire and parody, medical comedy. But what he doesn't joke about is using Visine. And I looked up the papers, and not that I would ever refute the word of an ophthalmologist because that's not my specialty. But he's totally right, folks. Visine is not the eye drops that you should be using for anything. It will reduce redness of the eye, but you can also get decreased tear production, which can lead to chronic dry eye. That can lead to different ulcerations. You can get a ton of inflammation to the surface of the eye. The other issue with that is it's toxic to kids. So if there was an accidental ingestion in a pediatric patient, there are actually profound things that can happen. Like they can be completely altered, become unresponsive. Heart rate can go down, temperature can go down, blood pressure can go down. So it's not a safe medication to have around. So yes, It does temporarily relieve red eye, but then it causes all these other eye problems, and then it can cause a ton of issues with accidental pediatric ingestion. This is a take it off the list. You don't need to have this medication in your house. So if you have a red eye because of allergies, antihistamine drops are way better to use. Some docs recommend Patanol. I use Ketoprofen, doesn't matter, whatever. It's an antihistamine drop. If you have a red eye and it's not due to an allergy, you can just use preservative-free artificial tears. You just need some lubricating drops. That's it. Forget the Visine. If we're talking about eyes, we're now going to go to ears, and I want to talk about Debrox. Some people end up getting earwax compacted in their ears. It can get dry and hard over a period of time. It can clog ears. You end up having decreased hearing. It's a very common thing that happens. And Debrox are over-the-counter drops that are used to soften the earwax and allow it to come out. Do they work? Yes. But guess what else works? Hydrogen peroxide, which is way, way, way less expensive. 0.5 ounces of Debrox costs about $10. 32 ounces of hydrogen peroxide costs about $1. So again, you can use the Debrox. It does work, but hydrogen peroxide is just as effective of a medication in resolving what's called cerumen impaction. That's that hard earwax that we talked about, and it's way cheaper. So we talked about antihistamines for the eyes. Now I'm going to talk about antihistamines for the body. The first line of thought that a lot of us have always thought is if you have an allergic reaction, take Benadryl. That's the first line. Update. That is no longer the first line recommendation for allergic reaction. The American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology put out a strong recommendation against the use of diphenhydramine as a first-line antihistamine. And the main concerns are because of how drowsy it makes people. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. So you can take Benadryl and you will be very, very sleepy. There's also a higher risk of overdose. Given these two issues, it's no longer recommended first line. The second generation antihistamines have now become first line recommendations. This is things like cetrizine, fexofenadine, loratadine. There's a list of them. If you go to the pharmacy department and go to the allergy section, you'll see a lot of those. They're considered long-acting second-generation antihistamines. Those are now what are considered first line. Finding out about this next medication made me a little bit sad. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but in that movie, the one woman's father is obsessed with Windex and sprays Windex on everything. Well, my friends, I used to do that with triple antibiotic ointment that contained neomycin. The brand name is Neosporin. And I found out that that is not the right move. I found that out a few years ago, and I was really, really sad about it. The reason for that is the neomycin component of that triple antibiotic ointment can actually cause direct tissue irritation. Now, is that harmful? No. Does that mean it's not working? No. The problem is if you're putting it on a cut or something like that, you can't tell whether it's getting infected or whether it's a local tissue reaction. This occurs in about 3% of adults and 4% of kids. So the FDA did issue a warning that certain chronic skin conditions may be more sensitive, and they recommended against the use of neomycin-containing products. The better over-the-counter topical would be bacitracin. You can use mupirocin, especially if you're worried about MRSA, but you need a prescription for that. Bacitracin is available for over-the-counter purchase. While we're on the topic of topicals, see what I did there? Let's talk about topical diphenhydramine. Now, we said oral diphenhydramine, it does work. It's just not recommended as a first-line agent anymore. Topical diphenhydramine actually does not work. There was an evidence-based review that was published that looked into this. Now, it wasn't a systematic review meta-analysis. It was more of just a systematic review part, not all the math. And it demonstrated that topical diphenhydramine does not work. Anecdotally, I know a lot of physicians who are out there who are allergists and dermatologists who are like, it is absolutely worthless, do not use it. Instead, hydrocortisone is more effective. So if you have some kind of mild rash or mild itch, you could just get over-the-counter hydrocortisone and use that. The caution is with any topical steroid, if you have pigmented skin, chronic use Or if you use something really, really strong, it can actually discolor the skin and lighten it. That can be permanent in some people. But a low percentage of topical hydrocortisone used as directed on the back of the tube should be totally fine, and it will actually work as opposed to the topical diphenhydramine. Now, I mentioned Debrox earlier, and I said it does work. It's just really overpriced. So do you really want to pay for it? I have another overpriced tidbit to share with you. If you go to the pharmacy aisle, in fact, I invite all of you to do this. Go to the pharmacy aisle and go to the children's medication area. Look at the infant acetaminophen and then look at the children's acetaminophen. You will find that they are both 160 milligrams per 5 mLs. You will also find that the children's acetaminophen costs about $7 to $10 for 4 ounces, and the infant acetaminophen will cost about $12 to $15 for 2 ounces. It is the same exact medication. The difference is one comes with a little cup and one comes with a dropper. I assure you the dropper is not that magnificent that it needs to be that much more for so much less medication. My pediatrician was kind enough to give me a dropper. You can also buy the droppers from the pharmacy for like $1.50 to $2. So get that and use the children's preparation because it is literally the same exact milligram dose. And you can follow the instructions that are on the infant bottle, but I do my own math. That's because I'm a physician. I don't advise any of you to figure out dosing on your own. I'm not saying that, but you can talk to your doctor to get the proper dose of acetaminophen for your child based on their weight. No need to waste your money on the infant acetaminophen. If you are one of my blog people, there is a table that's on the blog where I basically demonstrated what's in and what's out. I provided the list of all the medications that we talked about, and then I provided a substitute that would replace it, which is still over the counter. So I invite you to take a look at that table. There's a lot of good information on there. I fully admit, and I mentioned this earlier when I talked about the GI drugs, this is not an all-inclusive list. I didn't get into supplements. I didn't get into immune boosters. I didn't get into detoxes. I didn't talk about activated charcoal. And this is mainly because I had to draw a line somewhere. So I wanted to use actual medications that have undergone FDA approval. And then all those other ones, that is another discussion for another day. It'll probably end up being a mini series in order to get through all of it. I know I'm typically sarcastic, but I am actually not being sarcastic about this. It actually would be a mini series. What I want you to know now is just because it's an over-the-counter medication, that doesn't necessarily mean that it works. Some of these drugs were approved a really long time ago. And we have updated evidence that maybe they're not the best option, or maybe they actually don't work. We've learned a lot in terms of how to do research and how to do science. And honestly, that's what happens with real science. You do some experiments, it shows some things, but then later down the road, you learn other things and you learn to update the science. And that's the case with a lot of these medications. So I just wanted you to know this moving forward. I'm hoping now you have a little bit more knowledge to carry with you when you are in that aisle. And here's a little bit of food for thought that you can start having a discussion with your physicians and other members of your healthcare team whenever they are advising that you take certain over-the-counter medications. As always, feel free to send me questions. I love hearing from you, and I will talk to you all next week. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining me on this week's No Filter Doctor. If you enjoyed the content, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also go to www.thewholehumanhealthandwellbeing.com and sign up for the weekly newsletter, where you will get a link to the blog, that week's podcast, and a health tip of the week sent directly to you. It's important to know that while I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and it's not intended as medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. The information discussed should not be used to diagnose, treat, or prevent any medical condition, nor should it replace individualized medical care. If you have questions or concerns about your health, please contact your own healthcare provider. Any decisions to delay or forego a medical evaluation or treatment based on the information discussed in this podcast are made so at your own risk. My only financial disclosure is my medical practice, the whole human health and well-being. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week.